Hello, and my name is Erica from Enjoy Erica Art Studio, and I'm a local artist here in Mount Vernon. Today we're going to create this Memorial Day celebration heart. So we are taking these colors, these watercolors, and creating this beautiful picture. So you want to have those handy. You want to have a pencil nearby. I have just a simple round, about 1/4 inch watercolor flat brush. I have a cup of water nearby. And of course, anytime you're working with water, you want to have some wipes, paper towels handy. And then of course I have watercolor paper here, but you can use markers, pencils, crayons, anything that you have on hand. The sketch is pretty simple. We have an easy one today. But as you know, with watercolors, the trick is we'll be doing this in layers. So we'll be painting this in one light opaque style, and then we'll let it dry a little bit and then come back with a second layer just to deepen the colors and add more detail. You can also use a Sharpie marker to add some of the details and make it a mixed media project. But for now, we're just going to stick with some watercolors. So on my watercolor paper, I have it horizontally. If you can, start sketching a heart right in the center of your picture. And if you're not quite good with sketching hearts, you can take your time like I'm doing here. Or if you can write a letter J backwards, if you see like that, that's a backwards letter J. It's another little easy trick to learn how to make a heart. And back the other way. And the width of this heart, you want to kind of have it like 4 fingers wide. So once you hit about 4 fingers, then you want to kind of curve it around. So we'll make it fairly wide so this print of the flag fits inside and it looks visible and the details don't look too squished. You want your heart pretty big so that you can see what's going on. And just going to adjust to my taste. Round out any parts that need a little rounding. Because we don't have to get it perfect on the first try. That's why they make erasers. And so that's the first step, creating this heart shape. So standard heart shape. And then now the sketch lines are going to be this little corner of the flag and then creating the waves of the flag on the right side. So to get started with this flag wave, I'm just going to come right from the center and just curve it out a little bit like so, and then bring it up in a little bit of a curve. And just kind of section off this corner as the area where we put our stars. And then I'm going to place, I have several stars on here. Let's do a quick count. I have 3, 4, 7, so about 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I have 12 stars. It's not representative of anything. It's just for a design to look. And you can too, if you want to see how to make a star, I'm going to use the back just to give you a more detailed picture. But you want to start off almost like you're writing the letter A. And then you want to kind of come up and create a line across your A like that. And then we'll do a little connecting. And you want to do this fairly lightly because once we get that kind of frame down, we're going to come in and erase these inside lines. And then you have yourself a decent little star. And again, this is how you do your star. It's like you're creating an A, creating an oversized line across, just like that. And then a little connecting. And then we want to erase these inside lines. So we're going to do that right here in this little corner. I have about 12 little guys. And I'm using a light drawing. We are using watercolors, so you don't want the pencil lines to be too heavy. You want to be able to create the star and then erase anything on the inside. And I'm not putting it in a straight line. I'm kind of just placing them at a curve. So a good space apart for all of them. And then you want to come in and just lightly erase those inside lines. You don't want it too dark when we start using the watercolors. I'm just going to come in and fix any shapes. Okay, that looks good so far, so good. So that is our inspiration, just to remind you what it looks like. This is what we have going on today. And then we're going to start just moving with a wavy kind of line to show the design, and the inside has a little movement. And this is just following the curve before. So if my first curve starts off like this, I'm just going to continue to create a similar line and just follow it underneath. And then continue to follow here and go all the way across. So first I started following this initial first curve, and then now I'm moving all the way to the left following the curves. So here we go. Just like so. I'm going to do these last ones at a little more of an angle. So we have those, and then I'm going to come down a little bit of a longer angle like so. Much better. So we have the inspiration and the curvy lines. And really, that's it. That's our drawing. That's our sketch. That was pretty easy. No fuss, no muss. You want to clean up any of these center areas. I still have some stars showing some center lines. So I'm just going to erase the center lines and kind of re-outline any of the outsides. And that looks good. Okay. So we're going to get our brush, get our little cup of water. You want to leave it fairly wet. I am tapping off some of that excess water. And I'm going to choose two kinds of blue. So the first blue that I'm choosing is a little lighter. I have a little piece of paper here too. If you have a lot of watercolors in your set, a lot of times it's a good idea to get a blank piece of paper just to create a little swatch of color so you know where your shades are, and do it in the order of the colors here. But I'm just having a little a tester page here. I'm gonna dip in some more water and swipe across just to really get this palette wet and ready to fill our background. So a couple swipes. I like this lighter blue, and we want a lot of texture. So I'm gonna do the majority left to right, but I am gonna put in a little X motion. So I'm swiping left to right, but in an X motion, and I'm just starting to fill in with this lighter blue. And that's the first step, getting this background to be pretty pigmented. See a lot of the brush stroke. Lots of movement happening. A little more water. And just really getting in there. And if you're using markers, color pencils, pick your favorite blue. Make it more of a light blue. If you're working with colored pencils, you can do this. If you only have one blue pencil, you can start off with a light pressure and it'll create a light blue. And then when it comes to coloring the inside of your pages, you can add a little more pressure when you press down on your pencil and make it a little bit of a darker blue. So just some tips when using different materials. But right now we're working with some watercolors. And again, really majority of this using an X motion. Really not too particular with the direction, just trying to get that color first layer on. Whenever I'm starting to run out of pigment, I'm just dipping my brush in some water and swiping across. Slowly continuing to fill in everything. Moving right along. Getting as close to the drawing as you can. Going in and adding more water to the pigment. And I'm filling it all across. And just mostly a left to right motion. You can crisscross it. Give it a little texture. And again, getting as close to our drawing as possible. And we're almost done with this background. Then the goal with the background is once it's done, we're going to let it dry, continue on the rest of the page. And then we'll come in, as you can see, it's a little bit more pigmented on the sample. This is fairly light, so you'll see a change in hue once we let this first layer kind of dry. And we'll just build up on the watercolor. Okay, fabulous. A clean brush will do. It's a swirl and the tap at the bottom. I'm lucky to have one of these little water cups that I got at Michael's that has like a textured bottom. So when I swipe the brush back and forth, it does a good job of cleaning. I'm just gonna dry off my brush a little here. And now we'll get started with this darker blue. So now we're moving on to the darker shade. And the tricky part is to leave that space where we initially drew the stars, we want to leave that negative space white. So we want to get as close to the star as possible, but not painting over it. A lot of times with my acrylics and that kind of thing, we can always paint over our sketches. But for this one, we want to specifically avoid painting over. And if you feel like your brush is too wet and you do dribble or bleed into your star, take a paper towel and just dab the area. So you can take a little piece, and if you feel like you mess up, you can just press firmly straight down and pull it up, and it'll absorb any kind of drippy mess. And again, we're just going in, avoiding the white center of the stars, leaving that kind of blank. And we're using a different shade of blue. Now, if you're limited to your shades of blue, you can always add a little white. To the blue that you have. Use that for the background and use the darker shade for this part of your project. And again, not being too particular in the direction that I'm painting, just more so being concerned with not painting the white inside the star. So I'm almost retracing as best I can the little area of the star. Just like so. And keep doing that. And just really take this time to concentrate. And it's a nice time to reflect on all those people that we're remembering for Memorial Day. How much time and effort they put into being a part of something bigger than themselves. And here we are, just taking a moment to recognize that and celebrate it. And maybe have a barbecue. Because who doesn't love an outside little get together? And that just really kind of using the point to manipulate the paint. And I'm never bringing the color to the area. I'm always pulling the color away from the line. So as I press near the drawn edge, I'm pulling away. Again, if you feel like you messed up an area, you press down and absorb any of the extra paint. Another good thing to use to keep that space white, they sell, of course, white acrylic paint that will cover the area. You can use a white gel pen. I've even used white fluid corrector, like if you're using whiteout. That works really well in making these stars pop. And then they also sell chalk markers and Posca pens that have white, and you can literally redraw with a white pigment and brighten these stars. But for right now, we're just leaving the negative space white in order to create these stars. I'm just using this shade of dark blue, getting as close to the drawing as possible. And as I get close to the drawn line, I'm pulling the color away from the drawn line. And then just filling in the blanks. We're almost done here with our stars. So we're one step closer. So we'll be doing a similar idea here with the stripes. So we'll be taking on a red color and leaving the in-between spaces, the negative space, some white. In order to do that, you want your brush really clean. So once we're done with the blue of the stars, we'll go ahead, do a rinse and a dry, make sure there's no more pigment on there. And we're going to get real friendly with this color red. I'm going to start the first stripe at the top in some red. And just following the drawn line. Going left to right. And I put a lot of pressure just to cover a big section. Start off with the tip, press harder, harder, harder. And the harder you press, the wider the section becomes. Stripe number 1, complete. Again, this is the inspiration. And we say inspiration because it doesn't have to be exact. And we all make something unique to ourselves. And even me, who's made that painting, I did not make an exact replica. I made an inspiration. Because that's what it's all about. Feeling a little inspired. And using an image to create your own work of art. So every other stripe here is getting the not painted treatment, but it will get shaded later on. So I am just copying in between my sketch lines and just filling in as best I can. And again, we're letting that background drop. We are going to revisit it once it's a little more dry. But for right now, we're working on these stripes. And believe it or not, we are more than almost halfway through our project. So see how I'm putting a lot of pressure here. When I'm lightly painting, it gives me a thinner line and I can get close to the drawn line here. And when I press it really hard, it expands and really gets a thicker line happening. So I encourage you to practice that. It's hard to have a little control sometimes, but the more that you practice the pressure, the more you can practice the thickness of your line. So little pressure when it gets to this little thin area here, and more pressure as I want it to coat a bigger area. And another big splash of water into my palette. And last but not least, our last little stripe. Full pressure gives me a nice wide line. And we really want to give our painting a chance to kind of dry and catch up. And the reason why I say that is we have a lot of overlapping details. So we have a little bit of a darker blue around this edge, almost like a little bit of a sparkle or a little texture. So we have dark blue happening around the edge. We have this darker gray happening around the edge, and then a little bit of white and some light gray in between here. So in order to avoid too much blending with the red, we'll wait on putting some of this gray So let's get started on the second coat of our background and the details on the outside of our inspiration. So second coat, our background should be fairly dry. So we're going to get back into this shade. Get that really pigmented. Big drop of water in. And again, left to right with a little bit of a crisscross every so often should do the trick. Trying not to put the watery area too close to the already painted part. If you do get a lot of bleeding into your other areas, again, little paper towel, blot it down, and you should be fine. Okay, just getting that second coat in, already looking darker, more pigmented. Swiping left to right. Trying to avoid the edge of the area that we already painted. I'm just coming in with a second coat of pigment. All right, that left side is already looking a little darker, a little closer to our inspiration. Now to the right side. And swiping left to right with a little bit of an X action happening. Just like so. One more swipes across with this color. Ooh. Dripping in the red. Okay. We are getting there. So this second layer is really doing its good job of making it more pigmented. We have a lot of texture and movement. And now we want to clean our brush because we want to get into some dark blue. And the dark blue is just going to make a little appearance around the edge. It's going to be a little sloppy, a little messy, and that's the whole point. That's the way that it's drawn. It's supposed to look like a little bit abstract, a little bit like a firework type of texture. And that's going to be done with light pressure. And that initial dark blue that we had there, we're going to reuse that for this part. And I've loaded my brush up. I am going to kind of blot it a little. It's a little too wet. I want it a little bit saturated, not too much. And I'm just going to come in and create some soft kind of lines, barely touching, almost sweeping across and creating some X's and just getting as close to the edge as possible. And almost doing this little bit of a confetti dance around the heart. Starts off with this darker shade of blue, then it goes into a darker gray. So we're starting off jagged little lines all around. Nothing perfect. Just a little light sprinkling and smattering around like so. And that's a close-up of it. Just like a couple little lines, a little X here, pulling from the edge into the painting. Just a little jagged. It's almost like I'm making the motion of drawing a star and just pulling the stuff to the edge. And then if you see there's a little bit of bleeding happening, just press up and redo, just like so. Okay, so the blue outline is looking good. We're gonna create, I'm gonna use this gray with a touch of this black. I'm just gonna mix it right into this gray. And we're just gonna go and you want it just a little wet, a little damp. You don't want it too watery. And again, just kind of brush across, creating almost like little sprinkled color going around. The heart like so. This is a little black and gray action happening. So the first way around was a little dark blue. Now we're deepening the color with a little gray, black action happening. And we're gonna let that dry because we're gonna put yellow on top of most everything, and that yellow will mix with that darker color. So we're gonna try to give it a good dry. Next on the agenda is going to be adding this little bit of shadow in between the stripes. And the shadow is just basically, if you don't have gray, the black and white mixed. And I'm just gonna take any of this excess water out. Well, I want my brush fairly dry, but I do want some pigment. So I'm loading the paint up on the tip of the brush. And then I'm just lightly sweeping under the line, section by section. So just kind of sweeping under here. Want it a little drier. There we go. I'm just kind of sweeping that gray. Around the tops. And bottoms of the stripe. Want a very piecey, almost broken lined, not perfect, just a hint of a little bit of shadow happening. just like so. And then we'll take a little bit of black and come in and define this line in here a little bit better. And I'm getting there. We're almost done. We just have to work on our yellow. I'm going to fix this little area here in my background. Get rid of that little bit of gray that dripped. Like nothing ever happened. And of course you can use a little fan or just an old school piece of paper just to speed up the drying process, really. But you really want it very textured, very piecey, not perfect at all. We started with the dark blue around the perimeter, then that grayish black on top. And then last but not least, we did this little lighter gray shaded area in between. And we're going to just start adding a little bit of glow. So this yellow is supposed to give it a little glow happening. And this happens sporadically all over the heart here, just to show that the heart is glowing and emitting and or radiating a little bit of love for our veterans. So we are really trying to let this dry. This yellow really pops and doesn't work well if you are mixing it with the darker colors. If you don't have these markers, this is Colorless Blender. You should have a gel pen in white. You can use a gel pen. You can use a white Sharpie marker just to make that little white of the stars kind of pop. You can also create a little bit of a more defined edge using a regular ink pen. This one is using a very thin pen here, or you can use a Copic marker or a Sharpie marker. And I'm just going to take one of these thin tipped markers and then just retrace the stars. So while we're waiting for the edges to dry, so we can add our last color, which is the yellow accent, I'm just going over our little stars. You can use a colored pencil, you can use an ink pen. I have this Copic marker handy. I'm just retracing the stars here just to give it a more concentrated border. Give the star a little more definition. We're just retracing the areas that we drew. So there we have our stars. And then I'm just going to also go over the black painted line here. And when using marker, you want to make sure that your paint is wet, because wet area does not work well with marker. You want to make sure that the area when you use marker is completely dry. And this brand was Copic brand, but again, you can use, like I said, an ink pen, a gel pen, anything like that. Acrylic Sharpie in white to pop the white a little bit more of the star. We are going to add a little bit of a glow. So The painting is pretty on the dry side. We're going to come in with this yellow bit of highlight, add a little glow, and then we will sign our picture and be done. So we're going to take our time. I don't want my brush too wet, but I do need some of this yellow. So I'm going to work some water in this shade of yellow here. Use my little tester paper to see the shade. That's a perfect little yellow happening there. And then you want to kind of just use the paintbrush to tickle the edges, so to speak. So I have a lot of pigment on here, and I'm just gonna move in with some crazy line work. And I'm not being afraid to step into the picture now. I'm literally leaning into the very drawn edge and just outside the edge. If you see that your area is not completely dry, feel free to just wipe your brush off, do a quick rinse, and load up again. No harm, no foul. Just adding that little bit of yellow glow, and then just making sure it's not too drippy. Just coming in to the bit of the picture now. And these are just lines, almost making like the letter X. Then I'm going to add a little glow. To the outsides and on the edge here. On the inside. And again, if you're blending, clean your brush off. Come back in. Try again. Get a little of this yellow highlighted in here. Getting into the edge, around the edge. This yellow kind of really glows all around. And then finally, just a quick swipe across our stars here. Quick swipe like so. And then we're going to come in with a little bit more red because we didn't do our second layer. And it's looking very bright. We want it a little more understated in me. So I'm just going to come in, especially in this area. It's not as dark as I'd like. So I'm just going to come in with a little bit more red. I don't want the stripe to seem too see-through. Here we go. Nice deep color happening. This side is looking good. Want to get this side a little darker. Like that. Get this little section a little bit darker. Perfect. So this is what we have. This is our inspiration. last but not least, we're just going to add a little bit more pigment around the stars over here so it doesn't look too see-through. Just going to kind of come in and correct any areas that look a little light. You just really want it pigmented and not too see-through. Want the color a little bit more bold. And just getting around as close as possible with that second coat. Again, if it's too drippy, you can dry your brush, you can blot your painting and fix it up. Here we go. Looking so much better. I'll get this corner down here. And then we will be done, of course, with any painting that you complete when you complete it. In order for you to consider it finished, you want to sign your piece of art. So get your thinnest liner brush possible, or the nearest ink pen, or even pencil that you have handy. Pick a side. My favorite side to sign is on the bottom right corner. And I'm going to use a dark color to sign with. So I'm choosing this dark greenish black. And voila, we have a finished art piece fit to celebrate those we've lost on Memorial Day. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed this little project. I hope you have a wonderful, happy, healthy, safe Memorial Day weekend.